my daughter wrote that.
And I need to get a new battery.
Are we? Yeah, it's on. Well, good morning, everyone. As people are trickling in, I'm just going to briefly share. I'm Andrew, currently serving as steward here at Bethel. And with the October emphasis on stewardship, we had an idea a while back that it would be nice to have some brave Bethel members come up front and be a part of a panel discussion, really exploring and talking about individual journeys with respect to giving, with respect to service at the church, how that moves over time, how we grow into that, and that it really isn't a straight line. It's full of twists and turns. And I pray that this will serve as an opportunity for us to dive in deeper in our fellowship and in our congregation into these conversations. So I roped my lovely wife, Kiara, into facilitating because she does this a lot professionally up on the hill. And thank you all for coming this morning and being willing to have this conversation.
All right, good morning, everyone. And thanks, too, to the Bethel U team for making a space for this month. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves to you, and we'll get started. Amy, you want to begin?
Is this on? Okay. I'm Amy Narbison. My family and I moved down here 20 years ago, and we joined Bethel 19 years ago. I remember going to Bistro in what's now the youth room, and I remember Paula Matheson saying, well, if you're ready to roll your sleeves up, this is the place for you. So.
Good morning, I'm Bo Aylen. My wife and I joined in 1995. I think it was about the same year Pastor Tim started. Back then, they would hand you a microphone just like now, and you'd talk a little bit about yourself in front of the entire congregation when you were a new member. So this feels a little familiar. But we just love the energy. We looked at the other Lutheran churches in town and just the community, and you could tell that the youth program and the spirit here was really positive and strong. So we joined.
Hi, I'm Amanda Shaner Martinez. My husband and I started coming to this church in 2021. We were looking for a church that had similar values and a good youth program for our kids, and that's how we started.
Good morning, Trygve Norvold, my wife Dana, and I, and our son Odin and Wayne. We think it was 7 or 8 years ago, joined Bethel. We were currently previously over at Highview, Christiania. And when we moved to Castle Rock, then started looking around. So glad to be here.
We gave some questions to our panelists ahead of time to think about, and so some of them will answer some of the questions, and then we'll make some space at the end for Q&A. So be thinking about what you want to ask as well. So let's start off with you, Amy, with this first question. What are some ways you've plugged into the life of our church? What's a special area of interest and passion for you when it comes to giving and how our church is involved?
I'd say the biggest thing for me is along with Karna Hauk, we started the Alternative Giving Fair. We are about to have our 17th year of the Alternative Giving Fair. I don't know how much money Bethel Lights have given over those, probably close to $200,000 probably from that. But we kind of got inspired. I mean, that probably goes way back to my travels when I was on at St. Olaf, I went on global and went to 13 different countries and spent 5 months in mostly third world countries and just saw a lot of, poverty and despair, and I think that's where it started. Spent 6 weeks in India, and then, gosh, I don't know how many years ago, before we had kids, 20-some years ago, when we were members at Bethlehem Lutheran in Minneapolis, Lutheran Partners in Global Ministry was taking their first mission trip to India. So I said to Bryce, we have to go, because I really had fallen in love with India. And when you go to India, you go to experience the people, really. And so we went there, and we sponsored a child. We sponsored his education. We helped build a playground at his school. We stayed at one of the girls' boarding schools, woke up every morning to them singing their morning prayers. And we just had kind of a profound experience on that trip, which even after how many years has it been, Bryce? I still get really emotional about it. But we went out one day with another couple to go to the homes of our children that we sponsored. And we went to this boy's house, and his mother worked in construction, worked several hours away, would be gone during the week, and she knew we were coming sometime, so she stayed at home that whole week, gave up weeks' pay, so she wouldn't miss us, and she invited us into our home, and her dirt floor, she brought out the folding chairs, gave us all a bottle of Coca-Cola, which for her was a whole week's wage. And as when we arrived, she just came running out in this colorful sari that had every color of the rainbow, big bright smile, and then when we left, she gave these oil lamps just as her gratitude, with her son's initials engraved on them, just for the gratitude that she had for supporting his education. So I just thought, here's this woman, she doesn't have a husband, he's passed away, lived in this small home in a dirt floor, gave up a week's wage, and had really nothing, and she gave so much. So we were on that trip thinking we were there to give, and we actually received a lot on that trip, and that was just a really profound experience. So I realized, anybody can give, and 17 years ago, Karen and I kind of got inspired to start this alternative giving fair, and we do it around, Christmas, which is a season of giving, but it seems like it's kind of been hijacked and become a season of buying. And so the idea of it is to, instead of giving people something that they don't need anymore, or that, like a sweater or stuff that they don't really need, give to people that are in need. And so the Alternative Giving Fair is, we have projects from all over the world that you can give to in honor of someone, instead of giving them just more stuff. Last year, I think Americans spent $1 trillion on Christmas. And to solve the problem to provide clean water for everybody in the world would cost $120 billion. So to put that in perspective, we spend $1 trillion and we could solve the clean water crisis in the world for $120 billion. So that was where we've gotten inspired, and I've gotten inspired and brought that to Bethel. So.
I love that. When can we be on the lookout for that, Amy?
Yes, we start the Sunday before Thanksgiving, so November 23rd, and we run for 4 weeks till December 14th, and we'll be in the East Narthex.
I love that. Yeah. Just the story you shared about that woman's giving coming from a place of gratitude really struck me about what you said, that we give from a place of plenty and gratitude for what we have. Wondering, Trygve, on the second question here, when you think about money in the church and how it's talked about, gratitude links with service too. Can you say a little bit more about your thoughts on how you determine which amount of time, talent, and treasure you give, and why, and what kind of conversations you and Dana and your family have around that?
So years ago, when Dana and I were first married, we had Ruth Hayden. Who remembers that name? There you go, Paula. From NPR, they had a couples and money class she would put on. Everything was in the fall for like 6 weeks. So Dana and I signed up for that because we didn't really understand money. I didn't understand her thing. She didn't understand mine. And that was just eye-opening. And there was maybe 10 couples in the class. The second week, there was 4. So we're like, okay, those other 6, I don't know what happened there. But so anyways, her most important thing out of that class was to have a date night every week. We tried that, didn't happen every week, but those where we had intentional conversations about money, what we make, what we give, what we do with our time, because now that's probably more important to me than money at this point. So all those things, and of course my wife Dana's with Habitat for Humanity, so she sees all the different facets of that with the low-income housing, affordable housing, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, so that's. Yeah, how we determine, obviously we give to Bethel, we give to other organizations outside of Bethel, but yeah, so we have to now do another, I would say, recalibration of looking at what that's going to look like in the future for us.
Can you speak to, does that conversation just naturally arise? Do you have any practices as a family about how often you revisit the conversation of giving?
Normally, it would happen during lunch hour or after school before we pick up the kids. It used to be at the tavern in the Archer House, but of course that's not there anymore. But it might be at Imminent Brewing for a half hour before we got to pick up Odin or something like that. But an intentional time, not to talk about exactly what we're giving for money, but what we're doing. Where's the direction going in the next few days, few weeks, whatever. And that's been very, very helpful, I think, in our relationship in wrapping head around money.
Bo, would you share some of your thoughts on this? How do you how do you, Amari, determine time, treasure, talent, your relationship to that as a family?
It's funny because I learned from Gordy Olson, actually. He gave us this book. I think we were raising money for the building campaign, and it's a Henry Nouwen book called The Spirituality of Fundraising, more of a primer. But the whole idea was that, fundraising is a ministry, and it's giving people an opportunity to participate in a vision. And that really came through during that campaign. And, we can't be begging for money. It's really more positive than that. We have an experience, we have something to offer, and we really had to kind of look at it from that perspective. And it really changed, I think, our thinking about giving a lot. Granted, it was tied to that, the expansion that we did, which has been just wonderful. But, we kind of started our giving to a point that, like, okay, let's do more than maybe feels comfortable, and then just give raises. And so we started at a point where, weren't making a ton of money then, both in education at the time, and then we just kept trying to give more. And, I think there's a quote that, by giving you will be enriched, and I think very much experienced those blessings. But it's also just believing in this community, because we can't have what we have in the way these amazing ministries if we don't have the treasure, if we don't have the time. We have to get involved, we have to get connected. So we also realized it's not just giving money, it's giving of yourself.
When you were early in your career and you were feeling like, oh yeah, that just this amount of financial giving feels uncomfortable, were there any things that you did, or conversations or relationships that were important to kind of hold yourselves accountable to that? Because it can be really easy, I think, to say, you know what, I'm going to give when we have this much, or when we have this much saved, or when we're done with the kitchen remodel or whatever it is. Are there things that you committed yourselves to stick to that even when it was hard?
Well, I think we just had good role models. At one point, I was a steward, and during that time, we started the Simply Giving program, which is electronic transfers from people's checking accounts, and it was actually not without controversy, because of the role modeling, mainly because we like our kids seeing us put that envelope in the collection plate, and okay, all of a sudden that's going away. But we really took the example of, this is really first fruits giving. And to this day, Mari and I, the first thing that comes out of our checking account at the beginning of the month is what we give to Bethel. But through that experience of stewardship, I saw people that really gave. They did not make that much money, at least what I could tell, and yet they were super invested and willing to, share those resources. And, I know that couldn't have been easy. And so when you have people that set that example, and then you just see the joy that comes from it, it was really inspiring.
That's awesome. Amanda, I want to open this one up for you. Could you tell us a little more about a time when your understanding of giving changed or it grew into something more? What was uncomfortable or challenging about that? Did you experience any particular blessings or kind of a confirmation that you were making the right change?
Yeah. For us, it started kind of small. It started with when our son Ben started activities. I praise my husband for this because he would be very intentional about saying, is there anybody participating in the activity that needs help? Is there anything that we can do to support somebody? That grew into when he started school, we would talk to the teachers, find out what they needed in order to make their classroom a better environment for the kids. So we were giving to the schools. And then a good friend of ours, when we were talking to her about wanting to give more to the community after we learned about some homelessness in the community and just more things that opened our eyes. She connected us with Lisa at the CAC, so we started participating in adopting the family at Christmas, spending more time with supporting the CAC in those efforts, and then we discussed it with our friends and brought our friends into that activity, so our community around us was also participating in the giving activities. And then about a month ago, I was sitting with Pastor Inger at the dinner table at Wednesday supper, talking about how we can do more with the church and more giving with the church.
It sounds like in some ways it was relationship and just relationships at school and relationships through the CAC where the need became more visible, and you and Junior said, we want to step up and meet that need.
Yep.
May I put you on the spot and have you share what you do with your children? Because I think
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, of course. So a couple of years ago, we started accounts for our kids, spending account, savings account, and then a giving account. So when they get their allowances or when Ben mows lawns for neighbors, we put a certain amount of money in giving. And then twice a year, we started allowing them to choose what they'd like to do with the giving money. About 2 months ago, we were up at my parents' place in northern Minnesota, and the kids took cards. They painted pictures, wrote really nice affirmations on these cards. We put $20 in each card, and the kids went out in the community and handed each of these random acts of kindness to strangers. It was really nice. My son is right there. It was good to see the kids being able to provide joy to random strangers, and then a couple of those people actually came back to Junior and I and said, how did you start this? And we want to be able to do this going forward too. Tell us what you did. So we spread this kindness, and yeah, it felt really good.
That's awesome. I want to open this up to all of you. Have you experienced frustration and disillusion with church giving? Or just conversations around money and giving at church? And if so, how did you manage that? How did you deal with that frustration?
I was just going to say that I think sometimes we have a lot of excitement at Bethel around projects and certain ministries, but maybe less excitement for the operating budget part. And I struggle with that too, because we love to support initiatives that come up, and maybe there's profound needs that are identified, and you really want to help. but I think we also have to just be equally, if not even more so, committed to keeping things moving along. And I think it's easy to get behind when you got bricks and mortar. But again, we can't do what we do if we don't have the resources in place to make it happen. And so I really hope that as a part of the awareness that we're building with this month, that people can kind of see how important that really is. And I mean, we at one point we raised the money for something very unsexy, paying down the mortgage. We were very successful at it, and keeping the lights on can be just as exciting.
I think back to before we came here in our church in Minneapolis, they did a big capital campaign and they gave 15% away. And I remember being in the congregation when they announced what was given and how much was being given away, and it was just really I just remember getting chills and just like, wow, I was a part of that. It was really kind of inspiring and exciting, and I hadn't really been part of a congregation that had done that, like tied their capital campaign. So I think I don't think we talk enough about giving in the church, and in the Bible they mention giving well over 2,000 times. I think I have that correct. And they talk about love like 700 times. So it's talked a lot about in the Bible, and I don't think we hear enough about it. And Bo, you kind of mentioned that when there is, a campaign or something, that's opportunity for people and to give. And I think we underestimate the generosity of people, and we just don't know how much will be raised or who will give. But there's the element of, faith goes with giving, and you just have to have that faith, because we can give and think this is what it's going for, but we really don't know where that can multiply, and it usually does. A lot of times we don't even know about it, but there's one instance where we did learn about a time where through LPGM gave money to a school in South India to build a kitchen. Gordy, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but so here giving money to be able to feed these children at this boarding school, and then tsunami came, and that church ended up feeding thousands of people that were displaced because of the tsunami. So just something like that, where you don't know how your giving is going to multiply. So just having that faith.
It really is different to change. You mentioned this, Bo. I'm hearing all of you talk about changing the way we frame giving from less about asking ourselves and others to give, and more about inviting us to participate in what God's already doing. Trygve or Amanda, either of you, any thoughts on this question of when you've felt frustration? Amy just mentioned wanting to hear more about it and have more conversations about giving in the church. What would you two to say to that?
For me, it was probably 10 years ago or so, but nothing runs for free, right? The lights have to come on, the heat's got to be on, air conditioning, that kind of thing. So, it's not glamorous, but some of the frustrations, I was at a buddy of mine was an organist of a church in St. Paul, and they had a big, kind of the same situation. They got a $100,000 deficit. How are we going to do it? And they had a parishioner, don't know who it was, but basically stood up and he was going to rally the crowd. And he stood up and he said, "Yeah, my wife and I, we tithe on our gross incomes." And people were looking at their toes. They were looking at the ceiling and looking around. And basically, my buddy leaned over. He goes, "Well, he really put his foot in that one." So again, it's being asked, what can you give? What you see, when you see Bethel here during the week, the kids' ministries, the groups that come in, there's a lot of stuff going on here you don't see besides Sunday morning. But yeah, and again, the conversation, I don't think there's been a lot of conversations, at least I've heard at Bethel, about giving. How can we do some small groups, talk about, hey, how is your family giving? Without maybe dollar signs, but those kind of things I think are very important to get the conversation started. Like you were saying, Andrew, how do we get this, maybe a spark will light something.
On this note, this has come up a little bit in our conversation, but other thoughts about practices? Your comment just now, Trygve, having opportunity to talk with others about how do you do this? How does this work for you? What thoughts do you all have about things that work for you and your family in terms of checking in about this regularly? What you do even in your own spiritual life, and maybe ideas that come to mind about what we could be doing as a larger church community to just return to this conversation regularly.
You know, at one point we had these, I think they used to call them cottage meetings, but where we would go out into homes and, you know, kind of intentionally have conversations. I mean, they were usually timed around maybe a bigger fundraising initiative, but just as a way to get these smaller conversations going, I think can be really powerful. And, you know, I think now is as good a time as any, you know, to try to, you know, what is the direction that we want to go? Where are the needs? Where can we get people plugged into the vision and get people excited about it? Because I think people really are, but I think people don't know kind of how to have those conversations. I mean, I think money is as a taboo topic as there is, even after religion and sex. But so if you can invite in more maybe informal ways, more comfortable ways for people to have these very conversations, I think can be really effective.
I think I mentioned it earlier, but one of the reasons that we chose Bethel was the youth programs, and perhaps pulling together the parents with the children participating in the youth programs and having more of a core discussion with that particular group of people. I think that would be helpful. I think we, in our family, we tend to talk a lot about money, and we're very intentional about giving, and we bring it up with our friends. We're very open about it. We try to just encourage others to bless others.
I remember some years ago, Andrew and I, early in our marriage, read a book by a guy named Ron Sider called Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, which I think has like 8 or 9 editions now. But the main takeaway, or the thing I remember from that conversation as we were beginning as a family, was Sider said, the question is not what should I give? The question is what should I keep? Because the primary way to think about the gifts that we receive in our life, from creation, the monetary gifts, they're all gifts. So that really shook us at our core, I think, in terms of it's not about how much can I scrape off the top to give. It's what do I need, and the rest is to give. And that just was a very different way of framing things for us.
That Bryce and I talk about a lot about that too. Like, this really, it's not ours. It is a gift, you know, and it's to give away. And thinking of it, kind of changing that perspective of thinking of it as not a deficit, like what am I losing, what am I giving up, but just placing that seed in God's hand, you know, and seeing where it will multiply. But not looking at it as a deficit, but as just giving and in abundance, you know, giving away those gifts that we have been given, whether that's time, talent, or treasure, really. You know.
Would love to, Bo, you mentioned you had some thoughts. If you could summarize healthy stewardship, what would you focus on? Can you share your thoughts on that with us?
I think it's a challenging thing, because I've learned through my life and my career that, you know, money is really tied to security. And what's that? Security is really a fear about becoming dependent. And in my job, I've tried to help people become financially independent. But I think as a result of that emotion, we often, and I'm as guilty of this as anybody, I put that trust more in that security, and I don't put that trust as much as I should in God. And I think trying to, and we're evolving in that, I think we're improving, but I'm still amazingly imperfect. And I think we have to give everybody sort of that place to examine this, because there's a real internal dialogue I think you have to have. There's a dialogue you have to have with your spouse, with your children, about these very topics and what's important to you. But we also, I think, have to put front and center, why is this scary? And it's a real fear that people have, but I think we can also see where in many cases it's quite irrational because we are so abundant. And that's what I hope any stewardship program can kind of give people, that forum to have those really honest conversations, because money is very much tied to emotion. And we want to come at it from a place of abundance and not scarcity. But we all, I think, inside have that worry that, yeah, one day it could all be gone. But I think most of us know in life, when we've come from that position of trust and abundance, it usually works out.
Thanks for that. Others of you on this question of what makes for healthy models of stewardship, what would you say is front of mind and a focus for you?
Well, and then having your kids or children see what the family's doing, what's being discussed. They've heard a lot of weird conversations around our dinner table. But again, like Meals on Wheels. When we did that with Wayne when he was little, when he first came to live with us. And pretty soon I'm in the back seat, Dana's driving, and Wayne is telling Mom where to go. And that's been followed. And now Wayne is a young guy up in Minneapolis, and he's doing that on his own, for some satisfaction. But yeah, I mean, as far as the conversations, just have them, and the kids will learn, and they understand what's going on. Yeah.
More is caught than taught, I'm told. Any other lingering thoughts that any of you want to share before we open it up for Q&A? Yeah. Andrew, would you be willing to run the mic around for questions?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. This is rich. This is a gift, and I'm very brave. Opening it up, are there any things that we'd like to raise in a little bit of Q&A time?
Hi, I'm Lee Swan, and I'll try to make this brief because stewardship is incredibly important in my life. And I think tithing is incredibly important. That's been my experience. The irony I see, and Bo touched on it, at Bethel is that we are incredibly generous in special projects. And we can raise $50,000 at a drop of a hat. And I told Pastor Ben after the service, his sermon woke me up, being more responsible to support the base. I have been privileged to be able to give pretty generously in special projects, but I have not been equally generous in terms of serving the base. And it's the base that has to be functioning to do all these other things. So my encouragement would be, it's a little late, but the church that I belong to 3 different churches in Wisconsin and here in Florida. And my home church in northern Wisconsin always has a fall festival. And I would encourage thinking about some special drive for serving the church in the form of a fall festival or some special, I think if we had a special drive just for this, we would get a response.
Really quick, thanks, Lee, for that. One thing is, keeping the lights on, the base. I'm with you 100% on that, right? The shiny objects. Let's do Homes for God's Children. Let's do a community village over here on Highway 3. But it's also the stress. I can only imagine that, Ben has to get up and talk about it. That's their livelihoods. It's the base of the church, is keeping things going. That also invokes stress on the congregation, I think. That time could be spent doing other things, going out into the world. And so I mean, if the base was well funded, if that's the word, I think there's a lot more good that can happen.
Thank you. Anyone else?
In addition to questions, maybe just a word of appreciation also, Ray, something you heard that you want to say, I really, this struck me and I want to build on it, is also equally welcome.
A story comes to mind actually from Bo's comment.
We are live streaming it, Brenda, so for the sake of anyone who wants to watch it. Thank you, Brenda.
I guess I'm not loud enough for the live stream, just for this room. So Bo's comment earlier about trusting, the relationship between trust and that safety and security are so tied into our finances, and what would happen if we trusted, and then also piggybacking on that idea of not giving off the top, but what do we need, and then trusting that the extra, that the rest of that is like maybe has a different purpose, and that it's seeding and will be blessed as well. It reminded me of a story. My grandfather was in the process of dying, and my sister has a big corporate career, and she was spending a lot of time at the hospital in Dallas. And at that time, some toxic things were happening with her work where her job was being threatened. And as she is intentionally sitting in the hospital with family, being the rock that she always has been, she quietly told me about this stuff going on at work. I don't think she even shared it with the rest of the family. And I was like, what do you need to do? Like, are you concerned about this? She's like, no, God's got this. God's got my job. If it's not this, God will provide something else. And I just think that's such a beautiful illustration of what we see, what we can touch, what we know, what we can explain feels safe. But if all that's an illusion, what's next? What's possible? And I just think that story just came back to mind, and it seems to dovetail with exactly what you were talking about. And Amanda, if we still have any time left, I'd actually love to hear more about your comments where you were saying connecting with the families who have the kids in our youth and children's ministry programming. Is there any way you could expound on, like, do you have a picture in your head of what that looks like, or what kind of conversations, where the conversations are happening, who's involved in the conversations? Is it big group? Is it small? If you had any follow-up thoughts or visions about what you thought would work well in that capacity, I'd love to hear that.
I don't. It came to me during this discussion. So, no, but I want to carry this on, so I'll be talking more about it.
We have involved the youth in the Alternative Giving Fair, and I know Sunday school teachers will come down and bring their students, and they've given, because we have a kids giving price point too. So that's just one time of year, but we have involved the youth with that.
Yeah, I just want to say a word about talking about money. I think I'm so glad that you're talking about money. And we need to do that more and more, because money is a part of our faith. Giving is a part of our faith, a very important part of our faith. Just talking to somebody the other day who belongs to a rather large church, and I was talking about to them about giving, how does giving happen in their church, and they said, it's just like any other church. A small portion of the congregation supports the church, and 67%, they said, of their congregation gives nothing. Can you imagine? I don't know what the percentage is here, but I think we need to talk more about it and just encourage people. And from the viewpoint of abundance, first of all, that we all have, most of us have more than we need. And the other thing is about the joy of giving. It's a joyful thing. And you've expressed that. All of you have expressed the joy of that. And the more we can understand that and feel that, it's really a part of who we are. We're a generous congregation, but giving and the joyful part of giving can make us even much more vibrant. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Gordy. I'm thinking too, panelists, I'd love to give you the final word. One of the things Gordy's comment just brings to mind, and many of you mentioned, modeling, relationship, watching others give helped me. Professionally, I work with young adults day in and day out. And we know even, I don't personally know, but I'm told that giving is really low with ages 35 and under here in our congregation, that there's concern in terms of demographics in our denomination, that there's a spirit and a culture of giving in certain age groups, but not always among younger families. And so a word of wisdom any of you might share with us as we end in terms of how to model the joy of giving, how some of us who are in relationship with younger people in our own lives and families might challenge others to think about this if it's not a practice in their lives. Takeaways for you, and how do we mentor one another into this kind of relationship?
Well, I teach kindergarten and first grade, so I know children are always watching. And I know that from my own experience. I grew up watching my parents put the offering in the offering plate every Sunday. And if anything was happening at church outside of Sunday, my family was there, very involved. I watched them give to women in Africa every Christmas when I was a child. So I saw that modeled for me. And now with my husband and I, we have 3 children, now grown children, but I think we did the same for them. We had them be part of the giving. We give money for water for wells. We've done it, I don't know how many times we've given money for wells, and we've sat down with our children and said, here's possibilities of where we can do that. Where would you like to do that? They've been a part of that. So we've given money to a hospital in Africa recently, and again, our children were part of that. We've brought them into that and showed them what we're doing and letting them have a voice in that too. And I think just making habits of giving, again, in whatever way, time, talent, or treasure, but just making finding a plan that works and challenge yourself with that plan. I think we can always give of our time and, all of that a little bit more than we think we can. And that becomes kind of that powerful point where I think you really feel the spirit and the joy in that. But getting into the habit of it, and I think that helps a lot.
I was just going to say, I'd be curious of the people under 35 that do give. My guess is that those people are involved and they're in the community. And we have this whole broader issue with that. I think everybody's pretty aware of that. People just aren't going to church as much, and I think particularly in the younger cohort. And so, it's more than just the giving part. People need to see that there is real community here. There's something really special, whether it's spiritual health, whether it's gaining peace, prayer, hearing a wonderful message every Sunday. And maybe we need some kind of outreach to do that, where there's something going on programmatically just for this cohort that meets their needs, speaks to people where they are. And then you can start having those conversations and just like the mustard seed, start off very small. I think doing it electronically is the best because you have the discipline built in. But you can't just give. It's got to be a community involvement piece too.
Can we just thank our panelists one more time? Yeah. Like Gordy just said, we need to talk about it. We have to flex that muscle and be vulnerable and be willing to talk more about money. So thanks to the 4 of you for being vulnerable. Keep the conversation.